It's D-Day in New York City as residents cast their votes to choose their next mayor. Exit polls suggest that Democrat Zohran Mamdani is on track to becoming the city's next mayor. Enthusiastic voters rush to the polling booths to cast their votes as the race to elect New York's next mayor enters the final lap. Now, according to City Election Board, voter turnout was at around 735,000 votes at 1500 hours local time, which is roughly 4 times more than the votes cast in the previous elections held back in 2021. With voting set to close at around 2100 hours local time, residents of the Big Apple could be seen flaunting their I voted stickers, while voicing their support for the 34-year-old Democrat Mamdani. Voters say that they back the Democrat owing to his promises to make New York more affordable.
I voted for Mamdani. As someone who's been living in New York City for over 10 years, affordability, safety, making New York feel like home for so many people who've been living here for decades, for all New Yorkers, for working families, for business people, for immigrants, for underrepresented people. So it's really important that we have a mayor that represents all types of New Yorkers and makes New Yorkers a place where everyone can thrive and work and live happily, healthily, and safely.
Now, as the race to becoming the next mayor heats up, US President Donald Trump said that any Jewish person voting for Zohran Mamdani is stupid. Well, Trump also urged residents to vote for independent candidate and former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. The latest comments come after Trump warned citizens that federal funding would be slashed for New York if Mamdani is voted as the mayor. Now, according to the latest exit polls, Zohran Mamdani is currently leading with 44%, while his Republican contender, Curtis Sliwa, is trailing by 24%. Earlier, both Mamdani and Sliwa casted their votes as the city that never sleeps awaits its next mayor. As the race to power intensifies, independent candidate and former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, has voiced concerns over a civil war that is brewing from within the Democratic Party. Further, Cuomo said that the US President Donald Trump is not supporting him, while adding that if there is anyone who can protect New York from Trump, it is him.
Well, I think what you're seeing is a civil war in the Democratic Party that has been brewing for a while. You have an extreme radical left that is run by the socialists, that is challenging what they would call moderate Democrats. I'm a moderate Democrat. And that contest is what you're seeing here. Anyone who can protect New York against President Trump, it's me. If Zohran Mamdani were mayor, Trump would go through him like a hot knife through butter. He would just step over him.
And for more, we're being joined by John Ports. He's a professor of political science at Northeastern University. He's joining us live on the broadcast. Thank you so much, Professor Ports, for joining us. Now, so what's your assessment? We know that the exit polls suggest that Zohran Mamdani is clearly leading, but based on all the latest developments, how would you assess the situation right now?
Well, I think everybody expects him to win this election. The polls close in about 30 minutes from now, but I think he will win. I think Cuomo's comments there are a bit extreme. Certainly Mamdani is labeled, he calls himself a democratic socialist, and Trump has criticized him and labeled him as an extremist. But I think as one of your on the street comments made, affordability and economic issues are really prominent in New York, and Mamdani has spoken to that. And so I think he will move forward, and it will be a test of the Democratic Party because he is certainly more on the left end of the Democratic Party.
Right, of course, Professor Post, we're also being joined on the broadcast by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who is joining us from New York. Now, Susan, what's the atmosphere like on the ground? We know that New York has registered a record number of voters in this electoral bid. Talk to us about the voter sentiment on the ground right now.
Yeah, I am standing outside one of the polling stations here in New York City, and we have less than 30 minutes left until polls close for this election cycle. And you still see people coming in and out of this polling station behind me. There weren't a lot of long lines throughout the day. And one of the reasons for that is, as you mentioned, early voting drew more than 700,000 New Yorkers to the polls. That was unprecedented. At the end of the day, polling experts are predicting that some 2 million New Yorkers will eventually cast their ballots for the next mayor. So, this is something that the entire country is watching, as our guest mentioned. It's not only a New York race, it really will determine which direction the Democratic Party is going. And to a certain extent, what happens in the midterm elections, of course, not only here in New York, where we have mayoral elections, but also in New Jersey, there was a governor's race, and of course in Virginia as well. So interesting day. Voting day here in New York, but less than 30 minutes from now, we're going to get the first early results, and we'll see who's going to occupy Gracie Mansion, which is the official residence of the next mayor of New York City.
Absolutely, Susan. And you and, of course, Professor Posef rightly mentioned that even though it's a local election, Trump's presence can't be ignored here. He has thrown his weight behind Andrew Cuomo, and he's also threatened the city to penalize it if it votes for Mamdani. Do you think that has played into the voter sentiment at all?
Yeah.
Well, it may, but I mean, New York is heavily Democratic. It's one of the more strongest Democratic cities in the country. So I'm not sure that it's going to make as much difference. But the other commentator just mentioned too, we have two governor's races, and it appears the Democrat is likely to win both. Certainly as one in Virginia and likely to win in New Jersey. Both of those candidates are moderates in the Democratic Party. So I think it's a time when the party's going to have to look at these three elections and kind of sort out, how do we move forward with one who's kind of certainly more on the far left, and then two that are quite moderate, the governors.
Absolutely, Susan. And how would you like to bridge that gap between what you're seeing on the ground right now? Because we know that according to a lot of exit polls, especially one by CBS in New Jersey, when asked that if Trump's sentiment has at all played with the voter sentiment, we have seen that in Virginia, 52% have said yes. New Jersey, 51%. In California, 58%. So there has been a certain influence that we could see in how the voters are responding. What are you picking up on the ground on that?
Right. It was very interesting. I was talking to a voter earlier. She was undecided, actually, going into the polls. And, this is New York, as our guest mentioned, heavily blue state. She was saying, after she saw the endorsement by President Trump for Andrew Cuomo, she decided to go ahead and vote for Zohran Mamdani. So while Andrew Cuomo has somewhat tried to distance himself from President Trump's endorsement, not only President Trump, but also Elon Musk came out and supported him. So, one has to wonder whether or not that's a blessing or a curse for a candidate here in New York City. But you really do see the pendulum really shifting from someone like President Trump in Washington, D.C. And then, if Zohran Mamdani wins the mayoral race here in New York, how, it's all the way to the so-called socialist democratic leniency that perhaps voters decided to go for, as opposed to someone like Andrew Cuomo, who I guess now is considered to be a moderate in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And the race for the mayor for New York is the most watched for today's, and thanks to Zohran Mamdani, of course, and he has built a substantial lead in the polls, as we've seen, and despite lukewarm support from senior Democrats who view him as too left-wing. Now, we also know that if Mamdani wins, it will be a historic moment. He will be one of the youngest mayors in a really long while, and also his religious status has also played into a lot of controversies that we were seeing before the polls. Of course, how do you think that is going to change the sentiment, especially as it's also going to have a huge impact, and also a sort of dialogue with the Trump administration, of course?
Yeah, he has said himself that, well, first of all, he's been trying. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Please, Professor Boots, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that, the relationship with Trump, if Mamdani becomes mayor, which I think he will be a difficult one, and Trump does not hold back. That's very clear. There are, grants that go to the city, a variety of things, and so it will be a difficult challenge. But I think he'll have to navigate that. But Trump will try to make his life difficult. I wouldn't be surprised.
Absolutely. Now, coming to you, Susan, we know that if Mamdani wins, which the chances are pretty high, he will become the city's first Muslim mayor, and Democrats around the country will be watching to see his laser focus on his promises, especially with, of course, rent and groceries and wages that he said that we could see an effective cut down on that. How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, he's made some promises that are questionable ultimately, and whether or not they're in the realm of what the mayor can do. But I think what, Mamdani's not only identity, but what he has been promising and has been focusing on, and whether you like him or not, he has been on the ground running. I mean, he ran a campaign, I always say, that was very similar to President Trump's campaign maybe a year ago, where, they just went every single pathway possible to try to get their message across. And Mamdani really was that. I mean, they knocked on so many doors, they brought in so many voters. And I think it's not so much his identity, but the focus of his campaign, and we'll see if he can deliver or not, it was really affordability. And for New Yorkers, you talk to them, poll after poll, the latest poll was a Fox News poll that found that, 62% of New Yorkers are concerned about affordability. Now, the second issue is crime. That same poll saw that of the same people polled, 22% said that crime was a high priority for them as well, fighting crime here in New York. Those were the big two obstacles and the two challenges that perhaps voters had on their mind. But you see what a huge gap that is and how much affordability played into it. I think Democrats across the country are going to be definitely watching, not only because he's going to be the first Muslim mayor, and we've seen that, Barack Obama, although he's supported him, didn't endorse him. Someone like Chuck Schumer didn't end up endorsing him. These are big name Democrats. But you have to wonder whether or not, again, is the Democratic Party going into a new direction, and are all Democrats going to be comfortable with something like this? So yes, they're going to be watching how he's going to govern. They're going to be watching on whether or not he'll be able to, ultimately, he's tried, of course, and seems to be succeeding among voters, if he's going to be able to distance himself from his past comments and social media posts that he's had when it came to, concerns among the Jewish community here. So yeah, it's, all eyes are going to be on not only how he's going to govern, but his identity. Really, you can't really deny that either.
Absolutely, Susan, and those are very valid points there. Thank you so much for bridging that gap and getting us all those details. Now, to wrap up the conversation and get a comprehensive understanding, let me come to you, Professor Potts, and understand how do you foresee the next steps to be like, and what can we expect after we have a clear projection after the polls end in a few minutes now?
Well, I would say it's important to take a bigger picture a little bit here, because certainly the New York mayor race is very prominent, but the governor's races, I think, from the Democratic Party perspective and for kind of national politics are in many ways equally important. And so I think you do have, two incoming governors who are moderates within the Democratic Party, Mamdani, who is not. But he's in New York City. New York City is kind of a unique place in American politics. And so I would be hesitant to kind of draw too much of what's going to happen at the national level based on what happens in New York City. It's important, yes, but I think the Democratic Party has now two examples of two moderate incoming governors and one further left on the mayoral race, and they're going to have to sort that out and kind of how they move forward. And I think the bottom line many are looking at is saying, we need to make sure we address economic issues, which is certainly what Mamdani has done in New York with housing affordability and crime, as was mentioned.
Absolutely, Professor Potts. Of course, it's going to be interesting to see how the situation unfolds. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your valuable perspective with us.
My pleasure.